Okay, my name is Ray, and I'm going to tell you what happened on April 22nd, Good Friday, 2011. I'm a private contractor. I was working, I was getting ready for work, loading up a friend's van. I don't drive, and I wasn't driving. I have a friend here, and this was his first day, and he came here and parked his van right here, and it was a fairly, it was a full-size Astro van. And so I pulled tools out of my garage, which I constantly do, and I pulled out one of my ladders, and I was throwing it on top of the van. And when we're getting ready to leave, we see a cop car drives down this way. He stops, turns around, he drives past, goes down here, drives over onto the other side of the street, turns around, and he comes back and stops right behind here. And we waited for him. And so then he got out of the car, and he came to the driver's side of the van. I was in the passenger seat, and he asked if anybody in the van lived here. And so I said, yeah, I do. And I thought, well, maybe there's something serious. So I went out and I talked to him. And so he pulls me out of the van. He doesn't pull me out, but he asked me to come out. So we come out here. His car is parked somewhere over there. It's parked on the other side of the road, just on my grass over there. And so we go to behind the van, and I'm standing closer to the road. And we're talking. He wants me to go to his car, and I'm asking, what this is all about before I leave my property. And he says, well, I'm going to need to see some identification from you. And I said, well, what's the reason for it? And he doesn't answer me, and he says, are you going to show me some identification? And I said, well, I need to know why. And he says, no, you don't need to know why. You need to show me your identification. And I tell him, well, without a reason, I'm not going to show you any identification. And he doesn't give me a reason. He said, and then he threatens me. This is where the first threat comes. He says, if you don't show me, and he's holding his hand up like this. And he says, if you don't show me identification, meaning government-issued ID, I will arrest you for obstruction of justice. And I said, well, how can you do that? So we got into this dialogue about, A, he's not telling me why he's here, and B, he wants me to get into his car. And I want to know why before any of that happens. And, is there a warrant for my arrest, or what is it? And why does he want to see ID from me? And especially since I'm on my property. And so he threatened me a bunch of times with arrest for obstruction of justice, and I'm still trying to engage in peaceful dialogue. Like, well, how is it that I can be arrested? When I don't even know why you're here, and he was belligerent, and he's ordering me to put my hands behind my back because I was now under arrest. And I said, well, no, I'm not. And I started walking around to the front of the van. And then he runs after me, and he grabs me, and I just twist his arm right off. Like, he grabs me, and I just twisted my arm around his, and that made him let go of me. And I think right away he knew that I wasn't going down easy, and so he calls for backup right then. And then and I'm still like, I need to know why you're here. You need to lawfully explain to me why you're here. And he says, we had a complaint. I said, well, that's great. So you've had a complaint. He doesn't tell me what the complaint is, and while we're in the back of the van, he doesn't ever ask me for my name. He wants this ID, which he stated several times. And I also, it's important to note that I also told him that I could not provide him with ID because I was not in possession of it. And he was telling me that under some criminal code, I was required to provide him with ID upon request. And I said, well, not on my property, I don't believe, and I've never heard of that anyway. And I didn't get into any lawful legal discussion with him at that point. And so anyways, getting back to here, we're the front of the van's here. We're in a little bit of a scuffle here. He's calling for backup, and so I put my hands in my pocket to get my keys to go back into my house, right? So he already knows I live here. There's no question that I belong here, right? And that was ostensibly the reason why he wanted to see the ID, because, and I should clarify that too. He said, I need to see a piece of ID with your name and your address, not your address, this address on it, otherwise I'm arresting you. That's what he told me. And I still don't know what the complaint is. He hasn't told me at that point. He told me when I was over here that there was a complaint. So we're getting into a discussion. He wants to know, he wants me to provide ID. I'm trying to explain to him I cannot. I don't have it. I don't even have government issued ID. I cannot give you what you are requesting. He says, then you're under arrest. And I said, well, let me, and I made him clarify. Let me clarify this. You're arresting me because I am not able to produce for you something that you're demanding from me that I am not obliged to carry. Is that correct? And he said, yes. And if you don't give it to me, I'm arresting you. And I said, well, I'm not able to give it to you, so I can't. Then you're under arrest, is what he said. And so we're in this conversation. I said, well, you know, how can you just come here and then start threatening me on my private property to carry something that I'm not obliged to carry? And he says, well, the reason that I'm here is because there was a complaint of a break and enter, and I need to know that you belong here. So I said, well, first of all, you asked me who lived here, so you have evidence. You have some evidence that I belong here. What evidence do you have that I don't belong here? Right? And he doesn't get into that, and he says, either you're going to produce ID for me or you're going down. And I said, I ain't going down, buddy. And you know, maybe I was a bit cocky, but I was definitely going to defend my grounds on this, on my private property. Anyway, so I'm trying to engage in peaceful dialogue with him still, and I'm saying, listen, I can satisfy your concern that I belong here. The landlord, the owner of the house, lives here, and her door is in the back. We can go and talk to her right there, and that should satisfy that. And he says, that's great. Then you go and sit in the back of the car with handcuffs on, and I'll go and talk to her. And I'm like, that's not acceptable to me. I am not under lawful arrest. I am not going to sit in the back of your car while you determine whether I should be here or not, because you have no evidence that I'm not here. And so he refused to cooperate. I said, I can go with you, or I can stay here. I'm not going to go anywhere, but I'm not going to sit in the back of your car. And that wasn't good enough. So again, I'm trying to appease his concern that I don't belong here. And I'm trying to engage in dialogue with him, and yet he cuts me off, and he wants me on the ground, and I'm not going on the ground. He's called for backup. I can hear the sirens coming. There's more cars coming, so he's getting a little braver now, and he attacks me, and I just easily spin out of it. I spin his arm around behind his back, and I push him back out there. And now he's like, he's in shock. He's like, how dare you? And the other car whistles around here, parks right in front there, so his dash cam is right on me, and I want a copy of that, which I don't think they're going to give me. And he comes out of the car, and he just bolts towards me, and he's a big guy. And he's bolting towards me, and he says, get on the ground. And I said, I'm glad you're here. I need to talk to somebody who's rational and reasonable. And he said, get on the ground. And I said, I'm not getting on the ground. I'm trying to discuss this whole thing. And so then he attacks me. He comes and he grabs me, and they're both trying to grab my arm, so they're both on top of me right now. And so the big guy's here, the other guy's right here, and he's trying to grab this arm, and he's got this arm, and so I just swung both arms around, and I took this guy. While I got him, I took him and I brought him down this way, and I brought this guy right on top of him. But he tripped, and he ended up hitting his head along that concrete embankment there. So he gets injured, and I let them both up. I could have easily stomped them. I could have easily injured them, and I didn't. And I have to admit it took a little restraint from me, but I was not going to actually physically, purposefully hurt these guys. So they both get up, and this guy here, I'm not sure if he crawled out that way or what, but when this guy got up and he circled around here to get on this side of me, now that guy there, I see him just getting up on his knees, and he's got his hands on his weapon. This guy here, when I look back, he's got his telescoping baton, and he slaps it out, and he's ready to take me out, and I'm like, you know, in that split second, I could take these guys. I could still take them, and I could disarm him with that weapon. But that guy's got his hand on his gun, and you know, by the time I get him disarmed, he'll probably shoot me. I've got no choice at that time but to surrender. So I just turn around and I throw my hands behind my back, and they clamp on the cuffs. And they threw me against the van, and they clamped on the cuffs, and they clamped them on so hard that the circulation was cut off, and it was cut off for well over an hour. I have nerve damage to this day. My wrist is still full. It's still numb. I get pain in the wrist, and it feels like the cuffs are still on, actually. And up here, I can't even feel my skin, and in this part of the thumb. And I asked them repeatedly to release it and to loosen it, and they refused. And their attitude was that I was misbehaving. Meanwhile, I'm trying to enter into dialogue to find out how an RCMP officer can barge into my property and tell me that I have to produce government-issued ID, otherwise I'm arrested. I am trying to explain to him there were a half a dozen easy ways out of this, but they wouldn't have any. I needed to be placed under arrest for loading up my van. Right? So now his claim that he's here because a neighbor complained of a B&E. Look at those shrubs right there. These guys can't see anything, and they didn't. I spoke to them, they didn't see anything. That guy across the street, that's 36th Avenue in Langley, and this is 198th Street. That guy there can't really see anything, and I spoke to him, and he didn't see anything. And the only other neighbor would be that one right there, and he didn't see anything either, completely blocked. So my feeling is that that whole issue of they're here for a complaint on a B&E is completely false, and I do feel that I was targeted, and this is a message. And I'll get into on the video, it's raining out, so we're going to go inside. I'm going to get into what they told me while I was at the police station when I'm upstairs.